She was halfway through her final exam when the sound of shattering glass split the silence like a gunshot. Pens froze. Papers fluttered. 23 students gasped in unison as three black-clad figures descended through the third-floor windows, boots slamming against desks as ropes whipped against the frames. The fluorescent lights hummed above, a fragile backdrop to chaos that felt more like war than a university classroom. Alexis did not scream, she did not move. Her body knew what to do before her mind had time to catch up. She slid low in her chair, spine pressed against the wall, breathing steady, eyes cataloging patterns, entry vectors, weapon, formation spacing. While her classmates shrieked and dove under desks, Alexis's pulse stayed even. She counted rifles, noted sidearms, clocked the precision in their movements. And she knew, with a sinking certainty, that no ordinary graduate student should have recognized any of this. The lead operator swept the room with cold precision until his gaze landed directly on her. Their eyes locked. Alexis felt the mask she had worn for 3 years begin to fracture. "Alexis," his voice cut through the chaos, sharp but measured. "We need to talk." Chairs scraped, desks rattled. A girl whimpered under the weight of fear. And Alexis, quiet, overlooked, unremarkable Alexis, was suddenly the only person who mattered in the room. Professor Kensington stood frozen behind his desk, his mouth open as though words might come, though none did. For 3 years, he had known her as the student who sat near the back, notebooks always neat, voice always hesitant, struggling when debates grew heated. He had never once imagined that a team of Navy SEALs would smash through his classroom windows for her. None of them had. Alexis's classmates gawked at her as though seeing her for the first time. Clark, who had spent months dismissing her with condescending comments about older veterans struggling to adjust, cowered beneath her desk. Owen Fletcher, the only one who had ever offered to study with her without judgment, stared with confusion. Even the star student who believed herself intellectually untouchable was struck silent. The man stepped closer, lowering his weapon, his voice respectful but firm. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. There's been a situation." Alexis didn't flinch. Her shoulders, usually slumped to make herself smaller, drew upright. Her hands, once folded nervously around pens, loosened into readiness. She felt the weight of 23 pairs of eyes digging into her back, but she couldn't afford to think of them. She thought only of the men in front of her, their eyes, their stance, the urgency in their breath. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said evenly. The words were quiet, but they carried no trace of fear. The operators exchanged a glance. They had expected this. One of them stepped forward, his face soft with recognition. "Shadow," he said carefully, "we know you're here. Kandahar's blown open. The needs to be operational again." The name hit her like a blow to the chest. Shadow. Words she hadn't heard in 3 years. They didn't belong to the life she had built here, the careful identity she had constructed, the quiet woman who struggled to earn B+ grades in international relations. They belonged to another version of her, a version she had buried. Around her, whispers rippled like wildfire. "Shadow? Who's Shadow? Is she military? CIA?" The confusion was palpable, but Alexis barely heard it. She was back in a desert halfway around the world, hearing gunfire, Marius laughter, the coded whispers of assets whose lives had depended on her choices. The commander stepped closer, holding out a satellite phone. On its screen, shaky footage played, buildings burning, bodies moving tactically, coordinates flashing red. Professor Kensington glimpsed enough to know it was real. He couldn't understand what it meant, but Alexis did. She saw the terrain, the movement, the coded chaos. She saw a place she knew by heart. "The asset you pulled out," the commander said low. "It's compromised. 18 months of intelligence is about to burn. We need someone who knows the ground, knows the language, knows how to get our people out alive. We need Shadow." Alexis shut her eyes. For a heartbeat, she allowed herself to feel it, grief, old and raw, rising through her chest. And then, with a long exhale, she opened them again. The uncertainty was gone. In its place was something undeniable: authority, presence. the kind of quiet command that made even trained operators straighten instinctively. "How many?" she asked. "7 operatives," he answered. Then, after a pause, "including." The name pierced her. Maria's brother, Mark, a young SEAL she had once heard about in campfire conversations overseas, back when Maria, her team leader, her closest friend, had spoken with pride about the little brother following her footsteps. Maria had died saving Alexis's life, and now her brother was trapped in the same nightmare. Alexis swallowed hard, jaw tightening. "Professor," she said, turning briefly to the man who had guided her academic life for 3 years, "I'm going to need an incomplete on this exam." The understatement cracked the tension. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the class, almost hysterical in its absurdity. But Alexis's face remained steady. She gathered her bag, not the textbooks or pens, but her essentials. The muscle memory returned like an old friend. As the SEALs prepared to escort her, she paused, turning to the rows of stunned students who had spent years misunderstanding her. Clark, frozen with wide eyes, too stunned to speak, and Owen Fletcher, still looking at her not with suspicion, but with something that resembled quiet trust. "Take care of yourselves," she said softly. Her gaze lingered on Owen a heartbeat longer before she turned back toward the operators. Commander Cross stepped up to Professor Kensington's desk, his tone clipped. "Sir, as of now, all records of Miss are classified. Any discussion of what you saw here could compromise national security." Kensington nodded dumbly, still trying to reconcile the timid student with the commanding presence that had just stood before him. The operators hooked lines to their harnesses, ready to repel. Alexis followed with ease, her body remembering motions she had pretended to forget for 3 years. She didn't look down, didn't hesitate. Her hand on the rope was steady, practiced. And as she disappeared out the shattered window, she left behind 23 classmates and 1 professor who would never look at her the same way again. Somewhere below, the rotors of a stirred the air, already waiting to pull her back into the life she had tried so hard to escape. She had built a world where she could be anonymous, a woman defined by textbooks and exams, not blood and betrayal. But as the helicopter blades cut the sky, Alexis knew that world was gone. What remained was the one she had fled from, the one where people called her Shadow. And yet, as she gripped the rope, her boots sliding against brick, she asked herself a question that chilled her more than the wind. If I go back, will I ever be Alexis again? Why did the air feel heavier inside the helicopter than it had in the classroom? Maybe it was the rotor wash pressing down, or maybe it was the sudden weight of 3 years catching up to her. Alexis sat strapped in, headset crackling with voices that seemed both familiar and foreign. The SEALs around her spoke in clipped phrases, their eyes focused outward. But occasionally, 1 or 2 of them looked at her, not as the hesitant grad student they just pulled from a desk, but as someone they had once trusted with their lives. She kept her gaze on the tablet Commander Cross had handed her. The screen glowed with satellite images, highlighted routes, clusters of red icons marking enemy positions. The region leapt out at her like an old wound reopened. Kandahar. Villages she had once walked through, faces she had once known, decisions she had once made under pressure so crushing it bent her bones. It all came back. The smell of dust after rain. The tension in her chest every time she stepped into a room unsure if the next handshake would turn into betrayal. And one name echoing louder than all the others, Maria. Cross's voice broke through the roar of the rotors. 7 operatives compromised, including Lieutenant Mark. You knew his sister. Alexis didn't respond at first. Her hand tightened around the tablet. Maria's smile flickered across her memory, her voice telling stories about her younger brother, the pride in her tone, the worry in her eyes. Maria had died in an explosion meant for Alexis, a fact Alexis had carried like a stone inside her ever since. "What's the situation?" Alexis asked finally, her voice shifting into the clipped, professional tone she had once sworn she would never use again. The words came too easily, as though her civilian disguise had been peeled away with the glass of the classroom window. Petty Officer Parker leaned over. Intelligence network compromised. Local asset feeding information to Taliban forces. 18 months of work gone. Our people are deep under. Extraction window is closing. Alexis studied the feed. The terrain was familiar, too familiar. She could trace the roads with her eyes, recall the local power dynamics by memory. She had walked those valleys, sat in those courtyards, listened to arguments between tribal leaders that determined whether Americans lived or died. And then a name appeared on the report. Her throat tightened. Had once been her strongest ally, a tribal elder who had opened his home to her. His wife had taught her how to cook flatbread on a stone hearth. His daughters had sung for her. She had thought him a partner for peace. Now his name was attached to betrayal. "When do we move?" Alexis asked. "Wheels up in 6 hours," Cross replied. His tone shifted, uncertain for the first time. "But there's a question from higher up. They're not sure you're still operational, 3 years away, civilian life. They wonder if you've lost your edge." For the first time since the shattering glass, Alexis's lips curved in something between disbelief and anger. Her eyes lifted to Cross. "Are you questioning my capabilities, Commander?" Something in her voice silenced him. He gave the faintest nod, almost like a soldier bracing to attention. "No, ma'am, just making sure you understand the stakes." She looked back to the tablet, but her heart was pounding, not from doubt, from something colder, sharper. For 3 years she had let herself be small. She had let people assume she was weaker, slower, less capable than she was. But in 30 minutes inside this helicopter, the mask had burned away. And she realized she hadn't lost her edge. She had only been hiding it. The helicopter touched down at a facility she recognized immediately, a CIA, the kind of place where she used to prepare missions that never officially existed. As she stepped inside, conversations faltered. Analysts and officers turned to look at her. Recognition flickered in their eyes. Respect. Some even stood unprompted. Professor Kensington would have struggled to reconcile this with the student who fumbled through presentations. But here, in this space, Alexis didn't have to pretend. She belonged. Admiral Diana Wells stepped forward, her presence filling the room. Alexis had briefed her before, years ago, during operations that had never made the news but had shaped the world. The Admiral's face carried both relief and concern. "Shadow," she said, her voice low but warm, "we weren't sure you'd answer the call." "I didn't," Alexis replied, steady. "Alexis did, and I'm only here for's brother." The distinction was deliberate. Shadow had been their creation, trained, molded, used. Alexis was what she had built for herself. She wasn't ready to surrender that again. Admiral Wells studied her, then nodded once. "Fair enough, but we need to know, are you still capable?" Before Alexis could answer, another voice spoke from the side of the room. Major, a military intelligence officer Alexis had worked with before. She just reviewed the intelligence package mid-flight and flagged 17 tactical considerations our team missed, said. 3 potential extraction routes, seasonal obstacles, resource requirements. She calculated it all in her head before we landed. The room stilled. Alexis felt their eyes on her, not with suspicion now, but with something almost heavier, expectation. Continued, she also identified that cousin controls the Northern Valley. The family relationship's complicated enough to be leveraged. None of that is on our maps, but she knows it from experience. An analyst muttered, "How could she possibly know that?" Alexis met his eyes. "Because I lived there. I mediated their disputes. I know who they trust and who they don't." The silence after was thick. No textbook, no satellite, no report could replicate the lived knowledge she carried, and everyone in the room knew it. Cross leaned back, a faint smirk in his expression as if to say, "This is why we came for her." Alexis felt the weight settle on her shoulders again, not the weight of expectation, the weight of responsibility. She had spent 3 years hiding from it, but now, with every passing moment, she felt herself stepping back into it, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't let her brother die. As the briefing shifted, she realized something darker. If she took this mission, she wasn't just saving Mark. She was stepping back into a world that had already taken everything from her once before. For a long time, Alexis had believed she left because of trauma, because she couldn't handle the noise of grocery stores, the shallow small talk of civilians, the weight of every gunshot that replayed at night. But now, as she sat in a room of admirals and analysts, she understood. It wasn't just trauma. It was trust. She had stopped trusting the people who gave her orders. She had stopped believing the weight they put on her shoulders was ever balanced by honesty. Her jaw tightened. If she went back, it would be on her own terms. Later, as the team dispersed and the quieted, Alexis found herself alone with Major. The officer studied her for a long moment before asking the question Alexis had been avoiding. "Why did you really leave?" Alexis looked down at the tablet in her hands. Kandahar's terrain stared back. Villages, roads, names, her past. "Because I was so good at being shadow," she said finally, her voice quiet, "that I forgot who Alexis was supposed to be. And when Maria died, I couldn't tell the difference between grief for my friend and guilt for failing my mission. So I ran. I ran until I believed I was someone else." Nodded slowly, but her eyes softened. Maybe this mission isn't about going back to shadow. Maybe it's about proving you can be both. Alexis didn't answer. She looked at the glowing map and the faces of men marked compromised, and thought of one in particular, Mark, the brother of the woman who had died saving her life. Her pulse steadied. Her decision was already made. "I'll get them out," she whispered to herself, "but after that I'm done." And yet even as she said it, a voice inside her asked a question she couldn't silence. When the world needs shadow again, will Alexis ever be enough? How do you explain the unexplainable? At university, no one even tried. By noon the story was everywhere. Students spilled into courtyards, phones pressed to ears, cameras raised to capture the broken glass on the third floor. Reporters swarmed the campus like a sudden plague. Words like terrorist threat, government conspiracy, and national security breach trended across platforms, each feeding on the vacuum left by silence. Professor Kensington sat in Dean Caldwell's office, his hands folded tight, his mind still replaying what he had seen. The student he thought he knew, the timid woman who stumbled over answers in seminars, had stood taller than soldiers armed with rifles. She had spoken with command in her voice, had transformed in seconds from overlooked to undeniable. Dr. Caldwell rubbed her temples. "Federal agents have called every 10 minutes. They want all of her records, housing, emergency contacts, transcripts. It's all been classified now, completely locked." Through the office window, they could see news vans multiplying in the parking lot. Students gave live interviews to anyone with a microphone. Hashtags exploded. "Seal extraction classroom op who is shadow." Owen Fletcher knocked softly, his face pale. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Dean Caldwell, professor. The media's asking students for interviews. Some of the things being said," he hesitated, "they're not kind." "What kind of things?" Caldwell asked. Owen's voice dropped, heavy with disgust. "Clark told Channel 7 that Alexis was unstable. She said she always seemed suspicious, that she probably had PTSD and shouldn't have been in class with us. Claimed she had warned people, that Alexis's work showed military indoctrination." Kensington felt his stomach turn. Just hours ago, had offered Alexis help with her notes. Now she painted herself as the vigilant student who had seen through the, smug as ever, rewriting history to preserve her pride. "It's like they're trying to turn her into a threat," Owen said quietly. Kensington remembered the moments in class, the times Alexis had lowered her eyes, withdrawn just as she was about to say something brilliant. The questions she had asked, tentative but oddly precise. They hadn't been signs of weakness. They had been masks, cover. He opened his laptop and pulled up her grades. B-plus averages. A competent but unremarkable student. That was what the numbers said. But now, staring at the record, he realized the performance had been too consistent, too careful. She had been hiding in plain sight. She was performing, he whispered. For 3 years she was deliberately underperforming. The dean frowned. Performing for what? Before he could answer, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He hesitated, then put it on speaker. Professor Kensington, this is Agent Martinez, FBI. We need to discuss your student, Alexis. Kensington felt his throat tighten. Yes. There are questions about her academic record. We've reviewed transcripts, faculty notes. Something doesn't line up. Her performance seems artificial. Did you ever notice signs she was deliberately holding back? Kensington's eyes flicked to Owen, who was watching tense. He drew in a breath. Yes. At times, her insights were more sophisticated than her grades reflected. During a crisis simulation, she demonstrated knowledge of protocols not covered in our curriculum. When I asked about it, she claimed she saw it in a documentary. But it felt deeper than that. What else? She always sat with her back to the wall. She didn't startle at sudden noises. During discussions, she would start to speak as though she knew something firsthand, then retreat into basic questions. At the time, I thought it was nerves. Now. Agent Martinez was silent for a moment. Professor, you should know, her true background is classified at the highest levels. What I can tell you is this: Alexis was never just a struggling student. She is one of the most decorated intelligence operatives in recent military history. Dr. Caldwell gasped. Owen's eyes widened. Was she spying on us? Caldwell asked. No, ma'am, Martinez replied firmly. She wasn't spying. She was hiding from her past. She used academia as cover, maybe as healing, but she was never who you thought. The call ended. Silence filled the office. Through the glass, reporters pressed closer, students crowding behind them. Kensington closed his eyes. He thought of every time Alexis had smiled politely while classmates corrected her, every time she had asked him for help she didn't need. She had allowed herself to be diminished, underestimated. Why? Owen broke the silence. Maybe she didn't want recognition. Maybe she just wanted to feel normal. Kensington nodded slowly. For 3 years she had endured condescension and dismissal, not because she lacked intelligence, because she wanted peace. But peace had just been shattered. Far from the campus, Alexis sat in a dim conference room, her posture upright, her eyes fixed on the faces of men and women who held the power to decide nations. The screen on the wall flickered with a secure connection. Pentagon officials, CIA analysts, generals, all watching her. Shadow, General Stone began, voice clipped. Your academic cover is blown. Every network is running footage of your extraction. Social media has your name, your face. The civilian identity is compromised. Alexis kept her voice even. How bad? Colonel Sandra Phillips lifted a tablet showing newsreels. They know Alexis, graduate student. Photos, interviews, transcripts. They don't know Shadow yet, but it's only a matter of time. The word yet hung like a shadow across the room. Admiral Wells leaned in. And your classmates, some portray you as unstable, dangerous. The narrative is against you. For a moment, Alexis closed her eyes. She saw a smirk. Lectures. She had endured their dismissals quietly. Now those same voices painted her as something sinister. What about the people who knew me? She asked softly. Professor Kensington has refused interviews. Owen Fletcher issued a statement defending your character, but their voices are drowned out by sensational claims. Alexis clenched her jaw. For 3 years she had lived small, endured humiliation, so she could exist outside the chaos of her old world. And now, the mask was not just gone, it was being used against her. General Stone's voice cut through. Your options are limited. The needs you operational. Mark and his team need extraction. But once this mission ends, you'll have to decide, return to us or disappear completely. Alexis stared at the screen, her reflection faint over their faces. For 3 years she had believed she could divide herself. Student by day, shadow by memory. But the glass had shattered. The two selves were colliding and there was no going back. I'll bring's brother home, she said, steady. But when this is over, you don't get Shadow back. You get Alexis, and Alexis decides what comes next. Stone frowned, but she heard respect in the silence that followed. She muted her microphone, leaned back, and let the weight of it sink in. For 3 years she had avoided questions. Now every question she had run from was standing at her door. Was she Shadow? Was she Alexis? Could she ever be both? And beneath it all, one truth she could no longer escape. Sometimes the battlefield follows you home. Why had they lied to her? For 3 years, Alexis had carried the weight of Maria's death like a stone in her chest, believing it had been her fault. She had replayed the moment of the IED again and again. The sudden roar, the dust, Maria's voice cut short. She had convinced herself she missed something, that her judgment had faltered, that Shadow had failed. Now, in the secure conference room, lit only by the glow of classified screens, she heard the words that tore that narrative apart. It wasn't random, Admiral Wells admitted quietly. That explosion wasn't chance, it was a targeted strike. The air seemed to drain from the room. Alexis's hands curled into fists on the table. Targeted at who? At you. Colonel Sandra Phillips shifted uncomfortably, her voice blunt. Wasn't just compromised recently. He was tracking you then. He fed coordinates that placed you at that convoy route. The IED wasn't meant for Maria. It was meant for Shadow. The words landed like shrapnel. For 3 years, Alexis had believed she lived because Maria had saved her. Now she understood Maria had died because Alexis had been the target. She sat back slowly, her jaw tight, her eyes burning with a rage so sharp it left her cold. You knew. General Stone didn't flinch. We did, but you were too valuable to lose. If you had believed Maria's death was deliberate, if you had carried that truth, you might have refused further assignments. We couldn't take that risk. Alexis's voice was flat, but it cut like glass. So you let me blame myself. You let me believe my mistake killed my best friend. We let you think what you needed to think to stay functional, Wells said. There was no apology in her tone, just a military calculus. Alexis rose slowly and every pair of eyes followed her. She felt the old weight, the authority, the presence flood back into her veins. But it wasn't Shadow who spoke now. You want to know why I disappeared? She asked. Her voice carried across the room, low but sharp. It wasn't the trauma. It wasn't the tempo. It was because I couldn't trust the people giving me orders. And now I know I was right. Shadow Stone began. My name is Alexis, she cut in. Shadow was your creation. Shadow was someone you lied to, manipulated, betrayed. If I go into Kandahar, if I bring Mark out, I go as Alexis. And Alexis will decide when this ends, not you. The room stilled. For once, even generals had nothing to say. She turned away, the conference lights reflecting off the steel in her eyes. Her civilian life had crumbled in hours, but what she found in its ruins was something she hadn't expected: clarity. She was no longer a pawn. She would choose her own terms. Later, in a quiet prep room lined with maps and gear crates, Alexis sat alone. In her hands were two documents that could shape her future. The first, a reinstatement offer from the Pentagon, full clearance, promotion, command of her own intelligence unit, the kind of authority she had once dreamed of before everything broke. The second, a letter, folded carefully, smudged at the edges from being handled again and again. Owen Fletcher's handwriting. She unfolded it slowly, reading his words by the light of a desk lamp. Dear Alexis, I don't know where you are or what's happening, but I want you to know this. Some of us saw through it. Not the details, not the cover, but the kindness. You can't fake 3 years of that. Whatever you were hiding, it didn't matter. You made me a better scholar, a better person. Our department is already different because of you. That's what I'll remember. Her throat tightened as she read on. Owen had defended her. Professor Kensington, too. A few students had begun questioning their own assumptions. It was a small light in a storm of suspicion and lies. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into her pocket. The Pentagon's offer promised power. Owen's letter reminded her of something else: humanity. Major entered quietly carrying a tablet. Mission brief updated. Extraction windows smaller now, 24 hours, maybe less. She hesitated, then added, "Alexis, can I ask you something?" Alexis looked up. "Go ahead." "Why did you really walk away? I've seen your file, I've read the reports. They all say trauma, but that's not enough. Not for someone like you." Alexis exhaled slowly. "Because I was drowning in shadow. I forgot who Reeves was supposed to be. And when Maria died, I couldn't tell if I was grieving my friend or grieving my failure. The guilt ate everything. Leaving was the only way I could breathe." Studied her, and now that you know it wasn't your failure. Alexis's gaze hardened. "Now I know it was worse. It wasn't a mistake. It was betrayal. And the people I trusted to tell me the truth let me carry a lie because it kept me useful." The major nodded, silent. Alexis leaned back, her voice steady but cold. "That's why I'm not going back as Shadow. I'll do this mission, but after that they don't get to own me anymore." The following hours blurred into preparation. Weapons laid out, comms checked, routes memorized. But Alexis's mind kept circling back to. She saw his daughters' faces, laughing as they sang songs in Pashto. She saw his wife's hands teaching her how to knead dough. She saw the man who had once spoken of peace with conviction. And she saw his name, now written beside the word traitor. When the team assembled, Commander Cross briefed them with the calm urgency of a man who had lived too long with the weight of impossible missions. Primary objective: extract and team. Secondary: neutralize. Alexis's eyes flicked up. Neutralize. Command considers him a liability. His network's burned. He's compromised. Her jaw tightened. He's more than a liability. He's a man I broke bread with. He's a father whose children trusted me. Cross met her gaze steady. And he's the reason Maria is dead. The words burned, but Alexis said nothing, not yet. The room emptied, leaving her alone again with her thoughts. For 3 years she had tried to bury the person she had been. Tonight she would walk back into Kandahar as both versions of herself, Shadow and Alexis. The operator and the student, the soldier and the scholar. As she strapped her gear, she caught her own reflection in a steel panel. For the first time, she didn't see two people fighting for control. She saw one woman carrying both. The plane engines roared outside, ready to take them east. Alexis slid Owen's letter into her vest, close to her heart, and whispered to herself, "For Maria, for Mark, for the truth." Then she stood, her shadow stretching long against the wall. What does it feel like to return to a battlefield you swore you'd never see again? For Alexis, it was the sound of engines thrumming through her chest as the transport plane cut through the night sky. The others dozed in harnesses, helmets tilted forward, exhaustion forcing them into half-sleep. But she remained awake, eyes fixed on the black window. Beyond it, the desert stars burned like silent witnesses, the same ones she had stared at years before, back when she was Shadow. Every vibration of the fuselage carried her back. The metallic scent of the aircraft, the weight of armor pressing into her shoulders, the hiss of oxygen in her mask. She had lived this rhythm so many times it was carved into her bones. But she was not the same woman who had left this soil. Back then, she had believed she was part of something larger, that the lies were worth it if the mission succeeded. Now she knew better. She knew the cost of secrets, measured not in intelligence reports but in lives. Maria's life. She pressed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe slow. Inhale, exhale. She whispered the Pashto phrase his wife had taught her once, Sabra o, patience and endurance. The irony cut sharp, had betrayed her, or so the files claimed. Yet the voice inside her still asked, what if it is that simple? What if they're lying again? She tightened her grip on the seat harness. Trust had been stripped from her long before. Now, even certainty felt like an illusion. Cross's voice came low beside her. You're running this op, Shadow, Alexis, whatever you call yourself now. The men will follow your lead. You ready for that? She turned, eyes steady. I've always been ready. It's the reason they pulled me out of a classroom instead of briefing another analyst. He studied her a moment, then nodded. Fair, but you should know, these men don't care about your past. They only care if you can bring them home. She glanced around the cabin. Parker, Martinez, the others, hard eyes, quiet strength. Operators who had learned to compartmentalize fear until it no longer had a name. They didn't see a former grad student. They saw someone whose reputation, whispered in corridors, carried weight. Shadow. And yet inside, Alexis still clung to Owen's words. You can't fake 3 years of kindness. She wondered which version of herself these men would follow into the dark, the hardened Shadow, or the woman who had once tried to be just Alexis. The red light above the hatch flicked on, 20 minutes to drop. The cabin stirred. Weapons checked, harnesses tightened, helmets sealed. The quiet turned into ritual. Alexis reached into her vest, fingers brushing the folded letter close to her heart. She whispered to herself just loud enough for her own ears. For Maria, for Mark, for the truth. The plane dipped low. Terrain recognition screens lit up with jagged ridges, valley cuts, the sprawl of Kandahar stretching beneath them. Familiar, too familiar. Her chest tightened. For 3 years she had dreamed of escaping this landscape. Now it was beneath her again, waiting. The landing was silent, surgical. No floodlights, no announcements. Just boots hitting dirt, engines spooling down to whispers, then silence swallowed by the desert night. The air smelled of dust and heat even in darkness. Alexis crouched low, scanning the horizon. Villages flickered faint in the distance, lanterns glowing like tiny constellations on Earth. Cross whispered through comms, rendezvous with local contact in 30, move. They moved like shadows themselves, weaving through dry gullies, over walls, between sparse clusters of trees. Alexis felt the rhythm settle into her legs again. The crouch, the sprint, the stillness. Her body remembered even if her heart fought against it. There was a mud brick compound half buried in the hillside. A single lantern lit the courtyard. And there, waiting with arms folded, was a man Alexis thought she'd never see again. Her breath caught. The same sharp features, the same dark eyes, but deeper lines carved his face now, heavier shadows beneath his gaze. He looked older, more worn. Yet when his eyes met hers, something flickered, recognition and shame. Shadow, he said, his voice low, carrying both reverence and weight. You should not have come back. Every rifle in the courtyard shifted upward, barrels aimed at him, but Alexis lifted a hand. Hold. She stepped forward, heart pounding. You betrayed us, you gave them Maria. His jaw tightened, he looked away. I gave them what they demanded, not what I wanted. Do you think betrayal is always a choice? You know my daughters, you know my wife, they had them. What would you have done? The words pierced like glass. She saw their faces again, smiling as they sang, as their mother baked bread. She imagined them in chains, in the hands of men who thrived on cruelty. Cross's voice hissed in her ear. He's playing you, don't listen. But Alexis didn't move. She looked in the eye. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me? His eyes burned. Because I knew what you would do. You would choose the mission over them, just as your command chose the mission over you. The silence that followed felt heavier than any bullet. Alexis stood there, caught between rage and recognition. He had betrayed her, but was it betrayal or survival? The comms crackled, Parker's voice. "Ma'am, extraction team pinging distress beacon. Squad is cornered, we need to move, now." Alexis tore her gaze from her mission. Mark, Maria's brother, lives hanging in balance. But's voice followed her into the night. "You think you're different from them, Shadow, but when the choice comes, your men or my family, you will see. We are the same." They moved fast, cutting through ravines, climbing ridges. Gunfire cracked in the distance. The faint glow of muzzle flashes lit the horizon like dying stars. Alexis ran point, eyes sharp, every step a calculation. She wasn't Shadow or Alexis now. She was both. The one who knew the maps and the one who knew the people. The one who had carried textbooks and the one who had carried lives. As they crested the ridge, she saw them. 7 Americans pinned behind a crumbling wall, fire lighting up the night around them. And in the center, returning fire with the steady precision of a man refusing to die, was Mark, Maria's brother. The sight cut through her like a blade. His stance, his determination, it was like seeing Maria reborn in combat. Cross hissed, "Orders." Alexis's breath steadied. This was the moment. She had been pulled out of a classroom, thrown back into a war she had abandoned, betrayed by command, haunted by words. And now, with bullets shredding the night, it all came down to one choice. Save Mark and his men, or lose them like Maria. Her voice came firm through the comms. "On me. Suppression left flank, Parker with me. We break their line and pull out. No one dies tonight, not if I can stop it." And with that, Alexis moved. Not as Shadow, not as the broken student, but as the woman who refused to let betrayal write the ending again. What does leadership sound like in the middle of chaos? For Alexis, it was not shouting, it was clarity. Parker left flank suppression. Martinez lay smoke across the courtyard. Cross, push right, cut their angle, stays alive or we all go down trying. Her voice cut clean through the storm of gunfire. No hesitation, no wasted words. They moved. Muzzle flashes answered from across the ridge, fire spitting from windows and doorways. The valley shook with the echoes. Dust rose thick, choking the air. Alexis sprinted forward, bullets striking stone inches from her boots. Her body remembered what her mind tried to resist. The crouch, the sprint, the firing rhythm. Each movement honed by years of survival. But something had changed. She wasn't fighting for a flag or a faceless objective written in Pentagon ink. She was fighting for a man whose sister had died because of her. She was fighting for Maria's brother. A blast split the wall ahead, throwing debris into the night. Staggered, coughing, blood streaking his temple. His men huddled behind broken stone, return fire desperate and thin. Alexis dropped beside him, grabbed his vest, yanked him low. "Stay with me." His eyes widened at the sight of her. For a moment, disbelief cut through his exhaustion. "Who the hell are you?" "Friend of your sister," she snapped, shoving a rifle into his hands. "Now move." Recognition flickered. His jaw tightened. He didn't ask more. There was no time. Cross's voice roared in comms. "We're losing ground." Alexis scanned the street. Half a dozen fighters advancing, AKs flashing. She raised her rifle, exhaled, and fired. Clean shots, precise, not wasted. 2 men dropped. Another fell scrambling for cover. "Push now," she ordered. The team surged forward under smoke, cutting through the alleyways, dragging the wounded with them. Stumbled but stayed upright, every step pulled by sheer will. His men followed, battered but breathing. But survival was never simple. As they cleared the ridge and reached the extraction zone, Parker's voice broke sharp. "Contact rear, multiple hostiles closing fast." Alexis spun. Shapes swarmed through the haze, rifles barking fire. Her pulse spiked, but her hands stayed steady. She fired, moved, fired again, guiding the team through the gauntlet. Yet as she fought, words returned, haunting. "Do you think betrayal is always a choice? You will see, we are the same." Her rifle kicked. Another hostile down. But inside, the question lingered. When survival forces betrayal, who decides the line between right and wrong? Stumbled again, collapsing to one knee. Alexis dropped beside him, lifting him up, her breath ragged. "Not tonight," she growled, pulling him forward. Cross shouted, "Bird inbound 60 seconds." The sound of rotor blades thundered overhead, a dark silhouette descending through smoke. Hope and chaos collided in a single instant. But the hostiles weren't done. A volley of RPG fire streaked across the night, missing the bird by meters. The ground shook as the blast lit the horizon. "Move, move, move," Alexis screamed. They sprinted, the helicopter kicking up dust and heat. Gunfire hammered the dirt around them. Half carried, half dragged by Alexis and Parker, his face pale, breath sharp. The bird's door gunner opened fire, ripping lines through the darkness, buying them seconds. Seconds were all they had. They dove inside, bodies slamming against the floor. The ramp sealed, rotors clawed at the night, and the helicopter lifted, leaving fire and fury below. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Just the roar of engines, the stench of cordite and blood, the weight of what almost was. Then, gasping, turned his head toward Alexis. His voice broke raw. "You knew Maria." Her throat tightened. She looked at him, dirt streaking her face, sweat dripping into her eyes. "She saved me, and I couldn't save her." He stared at her, silence heavy between them. Then finally he whispered, "Then bring me home, so her death means something." The words cut deeper than any bullet. She nodded once, steady, "I will." Hours later, at a secondary north of the valley, the team regrouped. Bandages wrapped wounds, water passed hand to hand. The adrenaline drained, leaving silence and exhaustion. Cross studied Alexis from across the room. "You pulled us out, no question, but you risked yourself more than command would ordered. You moved for before securing the zone. That's not procedure." Alexis looked up, her eyes sharp. "Procedure didn't save Maria. I won't let it bury her brother too." For a moment Cross just stared. Then slowly he nodded, respect not spoken but earned. Sat on the floor nearby, hands trembling slightly as he unwrapped his gear. He watched Alexis like a man searching for something. Not answers, maybe just truth. "You're not one of them," he said finally, jerking his head toward the SEALs. "You don't move like them, you don't speak like them. Who are you?" She hesitated, then answered with a voice quiet but unflinching. "I was Shadow, now I'm Alexis, and right now I'm the one who's going to get you home." He didn't press further, but the name hung in the air like smoke. Shadow. That night, as the others slept in fitful shifts, Alexis sat alone by the lantern light, cleaning her rifle. Her hands moved mechanically, but her mind was far away. She replayed eyes in the courtyard, the way shame had burned in them. His words, they had them. "My daughters, what would you have done?" The memory tore at her, because she knew the answer. She would have done the same. And that terrified her. She looked at the sleeping men, at lying still but alive, and felt the crushing truth press in. War demanded sacrifices. Sometimes the ones you least expected. Sometimes the ones you couldn't live with after. She closed her eyes, whispering into the silence, not sure if it was prayer or confession. "Maria, forgive me. I don't know if I'm saving your brother or repeating the same mistakes all over again." The lantern flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. And for the first time since stepping back into this world, Alexis felt the weight not just of survival, but of choice. How do you measure safety when even silence feels dangerous? The walls pressed close, mud brick laced with old straw, the air heavy with sweat and smoke. The men slept in corners, rifles within reach, bodies twitching in dreams they'd never admit to having. The only sound was the distant hum of a generator, sputtering like an old heartbeat. Alexis sat awake, back against the wall, rifle balanced across her knees. She should have been resting. They all should have. But her mind churned too loud to let her close her eyes. shifted nearby, wincing as he tried to sit upright. The bandage on his shoulder had already bled through. He caught her watching. "You don't sleep much, do you?" he asked, voice low. She gave a faint, humorless smile. "Not anymore." He studied her like a man trying to put pieces together. "They called you Shadow. Some of the guys whispered it like a ghost story." Her eyes held his. "I was an operative before. Your sister knew me that way." His expression tightened. "And she died for you." The words landed sharp. She looked away, jaw tight. "She died because someone betrayed me, betrayed us both." Silence lingered. Finally, leaned his head back against the wall, exhaustion softening his anger. "Then don't let it happen again. That's all the meaning I need." Simple words, but they carried a weight Alexis couldn't set down. Morning came harsh and bright. The valley below shimmered in heat, birds circling against a pale sky. Cross gathered the team in the courtyard. "Command wants us east within 12 hours. Secondary airfield extraction." Martinez frowned. "Too exposed. Locals will have eyes on us." "Not negotiable," Cross said. "They want us moving. The longer we sit, the more heat we draw." Alexis studied him, her instincts sparking. His tone was too rigid, his eyes avoiding hers. She had spent years reading body language across negotiation tables, knowing when someone wasn't telling her the full story. Cross was hiding something. Later, when the others themselves with gear checks, she caught Parker by the arm. "What aren't they telling us?" He stiffened. "Ma'am." "Do ma'am me. I know Cross got more than one directive last night. What's the part they didn't brief?" Parker hesitated, glancing toward the others. Then he lowered his voice. "They don't just want out. Command authorized a strike on high-value target. We're supposed to confirm his position and eliminate him before." Her chest tightened. Parker's eyes flicked to hers. "I wasn't supposed to tell you. Cross said you'd compromise the mission if you knew." The words hit harder than gunfire. Compromise the mission. She thought back to the courtyard's eyes when he said they had taken his family. Betrayal is not always a choice. Alexis forced her voice steady. "And what do you think?" Parker swallowed. "I think Command doesn't care if his daughters are alive or dead. They just want blood on paper. But you," he hesitated, then added softly, "you've seen things the rest of us haven't. You knew him. Maybe you see something we can't." She looked away, the weight pressing in. Maria's face, daughters, Mark's pale stare, every choice grinding against the next. Cross's voice cut across the courtyard. "Shadow, with me." She followed him into the dim interior. The air smelled of oil and old rugs. Cross shut the door behind them. "You know," he said flatly. Her jaw tightened. "That you've turned this into an assassination, not an extraction." "Yes." He stepped closer, voice sharp. "Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment. Burned us. He fed intel that killed Maria and half a dozen others. He is a traitor. He dies." Her voice was low, edged with steel. "Or he was forced. They had his family. You don't know the difference. And until I do, I won't let you use me as your weapon." Cross's expression hardened. "This isn't about you. It's about operational necessity." She held his gaze, refusing to blink. "Then why did you pull me out of a classroom? Why not send anyone else?" For the first time, his mask cracked, a beat too long. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because someone up the chain doesn't trust you either, and they want me here to keep you in line." The silence that followed was heavier than any confession. Cross didn't deny it. He just turned, jaw set, and muttered, 12 hours, be ready." The day dragged under brutal sun. They stayed low, rationing water, conserving energy. But the air was thick with unspoken tension. Alexis watched her team carefully. Cross, too controlled. Martinez, restless, his eyes flicking between them like he sensed the fracture. Parker, quiet but watching her. And weak but alert, observing everything with the intensity of a man who had lost too much to trust blindly. When night fell, she stepped out alone onto the rooftop. The desert stretched silent, stars burning above. For a moment, she let the wind cool her skin, her chest unclench. But then she heard it, footsteps behind her, quiet, careful. She turned, rifle ready. It was Cross, no weapon drawn, just his voice low. "You're not wrong about command, about me. There are layers here you don't see." Her grip tightened. "Then show me." He shook his head. "Not yet, but soon, when it matters." She studied him, her instincts at war. Every lesson told her not to trust, but something in his tone, buried weariness, maybe even guilt, pulled at her. Cross stepped closer, his eyes steady. "You're not Shadow anymore, but don't fool yourself. Alexis can't survive out here. If you want them to live, you'll have to become her again." Her voice was ice. "Maybe I can be both." He didn't argue. He just turned and left her with the stars. Inside, she lay awake, Owen's letter against her chest. You can't fake 3 years of kindness. But in the silence, another truth whispered louder. In this world, kindness could get people killed. And as the hours crawled toward dawn, Alexis knew the next day would demand the choice she feared most. Not between survival and death, but between who she had been forced to be and who she wanted to become. What do you say to a man you came to kill, but once called a friend? The desert night held its breath as Alexis crouched at the edge of the compound. Lanterns glowed inside. Voices murmured in Pashto, the cadence sharp with fear. Her team lay hidden across the dunes, rifles trained, waiting for her word. Cross's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Confirm target, execute, no hesitation." Her jaw clenched. Execution, not negotiation, not truth. She raised her scope. Inside the courtyard stood with his daughters, older now but unmistakable. Their small hands clutched his tunic, their faces pale with exhaustion. His wife knelt beside them, whispering comfort. This wasn't it was a cage. Her chest tightened. They weren't hostages they were hostages with him. "Target confirmed," Cross pressed. She whispered into comms, negative, not clear. A pause, then sharper. "Shadow, do your job." But Alexis didn't move. She lowered the rifle slowly, breath shallow. For years she had blamed, for Maria, for betrayal, for everything. But now, staring at the faces of his daughters, she saw the truth written plain. He hadn't betrayed her to destroy her. He had bent to protect them. "We are the same," he had said, and God help her, he was right. She slipped inside alone, quiet as the wind. His eyes widened as she emerged from the shadows. His daughters gasped, clutching to him. His wife rose, her gaze torn between fear and recognition. "You shouldn't have come," whispered. "Then tell me why," Alexis demanded, her voice sharp but trembling at the edges. "Why Maria, why me?" His face broke, sorrow etched deep. "Because they held a blade to my children's throats. Because every man has a breaking point and they found mine. I begged them to take me instead. But they wanted you. They always wanted Shadow." Her throat tightened, and Maria. Tears filled his eyes. "I swore she would live. I swore I could protect her. But lies are stronger than oaths when you are already bound. I failed you both." The words hit harder than any bullet. Years of blame, guilt, anger, shattered in an instant. He hadn't betrayed her out of malice. He had been trapped just like she had been. But before she could speak, footsteps pounded outside. The door burst open. Cross stormed in, rifle raised, seals flooding behind him. His voice barked like thunder. "Target confirmed. Neutralize." Alexis spun, blocking the shot. "No, stand down." Cross's eyes blazed. "You've gone soft. He sold you out. He cost lives. This ends now." Her own rifle rose, steady. "Not like this. Not in front of his children." The seals froze, torn between orders. The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air. Cross stepped closer, fury sharp. "You think you get to decide. You're not command anymore, Shadow. You're just another liability." Her voice dropped, cold as steel. "Then why did they send me? Why not you alone? His silence was answer enough. She understood then. This wasn't just about. Command had sent her as leverage, insurance, maybe even a scapegoat. They didn't trust Cross and they didn't trust her. This mission was never just extraction. It was cleanup. And cleanup meant bodies. Her finger curled against the trigger. I won't let you write this ending. The standoff held. His daughters clung to his legs, trembling, limped forward from the shadows, his voice hoarse but firm. She's right. We're soldiers, not executioners. If we kill him here, we're no better than the people we fight. Cross's jaw flexed. He aimed at Alexis now. Move or you go down with him. The moment stretched. A single breath could tip it either way. Then Alexis spoke, her voice breaking the silence like a blade. You've already killed enough of me. Maria, my faith, my trust, not this too. She fired not at Cross's chest, but at the lantern above. Glass shattered, darkness swallowed the room, confusion erupted. Shouts, the scrape of boots, the shuffle of bodies. By the time the SEALs got lights back on, and his family were gone, vanished into tunnels beneath the compound. Cross's rage flared, but Alexis stood unmoving, rifle still in hand. The mission was extraction. Mark is alive. Objective complete. If Command wants blood, they'll have to spill it themselves. His stare burned into her, but the team had shifted. They weren't pointing rifles at anymore. They were watching her. She turned, voice calm but resolute. We're leaving tonight. No one moved to stop her. There was brutal, days of moving under cover, skirting checkpoints, rationing water until their throats felt like sand. But they made it. At the airfield, the roar of rotors filled the sky as the bird waited. One by one, the team climbed aboard. Cross boarded last, his silence heavy, his glare promising this wasn't over. Alexis sat across from. His face was pale but alive, eyes locked on her. You didn't kill him, he said simply. She shook her head. I couldn't. He studied her, then nodded. Maria wouldn't have wanted you to. The words hit soft, like balm on a wound that would never fully close. For the first time in years, Alexis let her shoulders ease. Not victory, not peace, but a sliver of release. Weeks later, back on U.S. soil, she stood on the university campus again. The classroom window had been repaired, the glass gleaming clean. Students rushed by, books clutched tight, laughter ringing in the air. She stood alone, unseen once more, but this time she didn't mind. Professor Kensington approached quietly, his voice gentle. Alexis, you came back. She smiled faintly, just to see if it still feels real. He studied her, eyes warm with something like pride. You look lighter. Maybe I finally put down what wasn't mine to carry. He nodded slowly, then after a pause, and what now? She looked at the sky, the sunlight sharp against the glass. Now I decide who I am, not Shadow, not what they made me, just Alexis. For once the words felt true. She slipped Owen's letter from her pocket, unfolding it one last time. You can't fake 3 years of kindness. She smiled, soft and tired but real. Sometimes, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And with that she walked into the crowd, just another face among them. But inside she knew, her story was no longer theirs to write. It was hers.